Good afternoon. We are now in week 3 of Social Work 541. So the overview of this week says that students will be provided with skills and tools that may be used to assess community functioning. The concepts of community problems, community need, community assets, community mapping, and assessment will be introduced and discussed. The 2 learning objectives for this week are as follows: to describe community problems, community needs, and community assets, and to develop skills in community assessment, including secondary analysis and community mapping. So let's go to the learning resources first for this week. There is an overview that we will go over at the end. There are a number of community needs and asset resources, primarily from the University of Kansas, their toolbox. Community problems, also from the University of Kansas, and community interventions, also from the University of Kansas. There are a large number of supplemental readings that will help you in the assignments for this week. So let's look at the first one. The first one is, hopefully you've already posted your My Community in Words and Pictures, which is the assignment from week 2. And so you will post that. It serves as your initial post, and you will respond to the assignment posted by one of your classmates. And that's due by Thursday with your response due by Sunday. The next is a discussion of unmet community needs. So before completing your initial post, make sure that you complete this week's readings on community needs and community problems. To understand the needs and issues of the community, you and your dyad or triad group will focus on for your community needs and service assessment assignments. It is critical to gather input from community members themselves about the needs of the community. So in this post, you will be identifying potential community members who could talk about your selected community needs and strengths. You do not need at this point to actually interview these persons, but this discussion forum is to help you and your group members brainstorm possible key informants for your community needs analysis, which is assignment 2. So for this assignment, you are beginning to talk to your dyad partner, and in one group, the 3 members of the group. So you begin to think about community needs and community problems in your selected community. So in 1 or 2 sentences, give the name of your community and the problem area you are hoping to address. Identify 2 persons who are knowledgeable about the community and its problem. Ideally, these would be actual persons, but the person's title is sufficient. Develop 3 specific questions you would ask each of these persons that would provide useful insights into the needs of your community, and then include the reasons why you think these persons and questions would be critical. Include at least 2 references from this week to support your thinking. So you may consult with your group members, but you are each writing your own initial post, and the questions and persons identified must be different in each of your posts. So an additional discussion response is as follows. Before completing your initial post, make sure that you've completed this week's readings on community assets and resources. All communities have strengths, all communities have assets. Understanding these strengths and assets is essential to understanding the community as a whole. In this forum, you will be identifying possible strengths, assets, and resources in your selected community for use in your community needs analysis. So for your initial post, develop a list with a minimum of 5 critical pieces of information needed for an understanding of the strengths of your community. For each piece of information or variable, include a data source or methods you will use to get this information. You do not need at this point to collect the information, but just identify it. Possible strengths may vary by community. So when thinking about possible strengths, consider the question, what pieces of information could tell you that your particular community is strong? Rely on your knowledge of the community as well as the readings for the course to this point. Do not include demographic information on this list of community strengths. Be more specific than this. What could be possible indicators of strength in your selected community? Again, you may consult with your group members on this, but you are each writing your own initial post and each giving 5 critical pieces of information that should be different for each one of you. So you are also going to respond to one of your classmates, and in your response, think about other pieces of information that would expand and support your classmates' work. As always, your initial post is due by Thursday, your response is due by Sunday. There is one more activity for this week, and that is someone from your group is to send me a message via Canvas Messenger with the name of the community and the community problem that you and your partner or partners will be examining for the 3 community needs and services assessment assignments. You may choose to do a geographic community or a virtual or non-formal community or group. Please make sure that the community problem you are selecting is an actual problem your selected community is experiencing. Make sure that you include all members' names in the email along with the community name and community problem. So now let's talk about assessing communities' needs and assets. Again, the objectives are to describe community problems, community needs, and community assets, and to develop skills in community assessment, including secondary analysis and community mapping. The overview for this week we have provided already. So how do we define community problems? What is a problem? Consider the examples of problems below. What do they have in common? Depression, crime, violence, global climate change, poverty. Answer: social problems have 2 components. There is an objective component and a subjective one. The traditional definition of a problem says that when enough people in a society agree that a condition exists that threatens the quality of their lives and their most cherished values, and they also agree that something should be done to remedy the condition, that is a traditional definition of a social problem, which is vague. Further, these distresses differ across cultures and societies. Because Americans stress personal individualism, we commonly think in terms of the individual, quote-unquote, deviant and their problem. In other cultures, distress is more often linked to failures in the system or governmental response. So our main point to remember is when we want to examine community problems, we need to look at both the objective and subjective characteristics. Problem sources. To understand both those characteristics, we must look at the many sources of community problems. There are a variety of theories that try to explain those sources. So sociological perspectives on social problems tend to focus on one of 2 different levels: theories of society, or the macro theories, and social psychological theories, which are micro theories. Macro theories include structural functionalism and conflict theory. Micro theories include symbolic interaction. So the functionalist perspective, aka structural functionalism, first was used by Auguste Comte and Herbert Spencer. The central idea of this theory is that society is a whole unit made up of interrelated parts that work together. It views society as something like a living organism with the different institutions acting like the brain and the heart to keep the body alive. So functionalists see a common set of norms and values as the glue that holds groups, institutions, and whole societies together. Thus, one of the major sources of contemporary social problems is the weakening of the social consensus. Functionalist theories assume that human beings work together through common consensus to collectively preserve society. So functionalist perspective continued, talks about social disorganization, which involves a breakdown of social structure so that its various parts no longer work together as smoothly as they once did. Conflict theory, on the other hand, is associated with the writings of Karl Marx. The conflict perspective assumes that social behavior is best understood in terms of conflict or tension among groups that are competing. It views societies as being composed of diverse groups with conflicting values and interests. Conflict theorists see a diverse collection of social groups all struggling for wealth, power, and prestige. Marx stressed that there are two social classes, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. Conflict socialists see social problems as the inevitable byproducts of power. Social problems are in large part the result of the intentional exploitation of weak groups by powerful ones. Sociologists use the conflict model not only on economic conflicts, but also on conflicts that have no clear economic basis, such as conflicts over values, ethics, and behavior. The conflict theorists define social problems as conditions that are incompatible with group values. According to this theory, social problems occur when groups with different values meet and compete. And from this perspective, social problems need to be understood in terms of which groups hold which values and have the power to enforce them against the wishes of other groups. Feminist theory is not really a single theory, but a group of theories that share a concern with the same basic questions. Many feminists believe that the exploitation of women by their male counterparts is the original and most basic form of social exploitation. So from a symbolic interactionist perspective, the phrase is attributed to George Herbert Mead. Social psychology is concerned with the behavior of single individuals and small groups and their relationships with the larger society. So symbolic interactionists view symbols, things that we attach meaning to, as the basis of social life. A symbol is something representing something else. Symbols range from words and language to nonverbal gestures and signs. According to symbolic interaction, people attach meanings to each other's words and actions. To understand individual behavior, the interactionist tries to look at the world through the eyes of the actors involved. This understanding of the conditions in which we find ourselves is known as the definition of the situation. Symbolic interactionism explains our behavior in terms of the patterns of thoughts and beliefs we have and in terms of the meaning we give our lives. So labeling from an interactionist view. This theory focuses on the impact of labels applied to those who deviate from the norm. Power differences result in an inconsistency in labeling. So labeling theorists argue that social problems are conditions under which certain behaviors or situations become defined as social problems, which is why labeling our clients is so dangerous and not beneficial. So labeling, you can look at the media and see how people are labeled. So who benefits if we label people who are in same-sex partnerships as deviant, which is going on a lot in conservative media? If we label some people as freedom fighters and others as terrorists, or we label some people who are looters versus desperate survivors, what happens with that labeling? So according to labeling theory, the way to solve social problems is to change the definition of what is considered deviant. So main points to remember. This requires us to understand problems from many perspectives, but most importantly, the perspective of our clients. This approach argues that some social problems become dominant and others remain weak or unheeded, and the activities of individuals and institutions in society shape our consciousness of the social world. Journalists, television commentators, editorial writers, and professors, among others, can shape how we view individuals, organizations, and communities in our society by just a very few words. How do we define community needs? Needs, like problems, can have an objective component and a subjective component. Sometimes a typology is used where needs are considered relative while norms have established values. So theoretical understanding of need in our society. One useful way of thinking of a need is that needs are a condition that limits a person from meeting his or her or their potential. We need to change the language. Poncion in 1962 said the society's first responsibility is to meet basic survival needs of its members, biological, social, emotional, and spiritual. That person also asserts that every society will identify a level below which no one should fall. You have all seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that at the top is self-actualization, and at the bottom is taking care of physiological need. So there are normative, perceived, expressed, and relative needs, and each type provides something useful in understanding a community. So a normative need is the existence of standards or criteria established by custom, authority, or general consensus against which quantity or quality of a situation or condition is measured. It works with existing data, generates objective targets, and the need levels change as knowledge, technology, and values change. A perceived need is defined by what people think or feel about their needs. It allows for responsive service delivery, and you can conduct interviews, focus groups, and town meetings to come up with what a community sees as their needs, and standards will change when the respondents change. Express need is defined by the number of people who have actually sought help. So it focuses on circumstances in which feeling is now translated to action. A major weakness is that the assumption that all persons that need help will seek that help. Relative need is the gap between level of services existing in one community and those existing in similar communities or geographic areas. Must consider differences in population and social pathology and concerns about equity. Qualitative data consists of values that can be separated into different categories that are distinguished by some non-numeric characteristic, Quantitative data represents counts or measurements. So what's the relationship between needs assessment and program planning? Problems are translated to needs are translated to intervention. A needs assessment starts with problem analysis, integrates qualitative and quantitative methods, informs solutions, and can define the size of the target group, and needs are translated into measurable objectives, resources, and criteria necessary for program planning and evaluation. What are some methodologies? Extrapolating from existing studies, normative need, using resource inventories, normative and relative need, using statistics expressed in relative need, conducting social surveys, perceived need, and holding a public forum, perceived need. Interpreting results. Social problems and needs are not distributed equally in geographic space. So a spatial analysis uses social or health indicators to classify geographical areas into typologies, and a factor analysis is a statistical technique that can take large numbers of variables and reduce them to a smaller number of constructs or indicators. So that's the reference for this component of the lecture. So how do we conduct a community needs assessment? So we have to know the purpose. Why are you doing this? What are your goals? What do you know already? What do you want? What do you need to know? Who is the audience for this needs assessment? Some assumptions are around the study parameters. How do you define the problem? What are the geospatial limitations? And how do you define and measure impact? Anticipated supports and barriers. What issues do you expect to confront affecting universality and transferability? Institutional support, funding, inter-organizational collaboration, inter-organizational support, or causality. So what are some of the process steps? Select the research advisory group, select the questions, which determines everything, including your type of evaluation, and determine your data sources. There are many data sources, which could be governmental, administrative records, case records, pre-post testing, surveys. Everyone has a strengths, and you may want to use multiple methods. So dependent variables are your impact domains. You can read this chart. Dependent variables, impact domains. Look at this chart. And examples of social services under dependent variables. Another chart on key informant constituencies. So with that is the lecture for the week. You have the reading assignments. You have several activities, discussion posts for the week, 2 of which require you to work with your dyad partner or partners or triad partners for beginning to look at your communities and also fulfill the requirements for the assignments for this week. Again, I look forward to reading all your posts, and if you have any questions, please contact me as quickly as possible. Have a wonderful week.